In the beginning, there was...
The Bitchspot Report. Welcome to the Bitchspot Report, the conservative atheist podcast that's not afraid to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Every week, your hosts, Cephas and Mike, will take on the latest religious and political news and examine the world around us from a distinctly conservative and skeptical perspective. Join us now for this episode of the Bitchspot Report. Wherever you go, there we are. Welcome to the Bitchspot Report, the weekly conservative atheist podcast that isn't afraid to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, no matter who it pisses off. For the next 90-ish minutes, your hosts Cephas and Mike will take on religion, politics, and everything in between from a distinctly conservative perspective. So let's get the ball rolling and get started with episode 29 of the Bitchspot Report. Hey, how's it going this week?
It's been going great. Not too bad.
That's cool.
Nothing really exciting. It's just nothing bad has happened, so I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah, nothing bad going on here either. It's just same old stuff.
Yeah.
You know. One thing I wanted to ask you, and I say this only because I have gone completely nuts again, and I don't even understand why I did it. I didn't recognize I was doing it until I did it. But I'm never ever going to run out of material, either for the blog or for this podcast, because the amount of things out there that just leave me shaking my head about politics and religion is just mind-boggling. I kind of realized that when I figured out that I've written all the way up until October 20th for the Bitchspot blog, without even realizing how a month and a half in advance I'm out there, and I still have a whole bunch of stuff I can write, and I'm just going, oh my God, there's just so much stupid crap out there to write about.
Oh yeah.
I mean, how far out do you ever think about, like, on your podcast?
I've got a list. I keep a list of, I've got a whole bunch of topics, and, well, here, let me grab the book here. I got it right here. Let me see where I'm at right now. Where's it? Come on, page. Let's see. I've got up to 103 topics sitting in my book.
Yeah, well, I guess it pays to be prepared.
Yes, and I mean, a lot of them is, like when you get into the bigger conspiracies, I'm going to split up I'm doing a JFK right now. I've got that split into 6 segments, and I haven't even decided how I'm going to handle the 9/11. That could easily go into 6, 8, 10 segments if necessary. So I'm not at a loss for material, and actually I picked up a book, I think it's just come out, A Culture of Conspiracy, and I just gone through the first few pages of it, and there's stuff that I didn't even know about, and I'm sure my list is going to grow 10, 20, 30 more conspiracies. So it's like herpes, the gift that keeps on giving, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree. Every week we do 4 news stories, approximately, and it's hard to actually get it down to just 4. I come up and I'm going, well, I could do this one, that one, these 4, that 7 over there, and I could do like 50 news stories a week and still not run out of anything to write about on the blog. Religion it just blows me away how many stupid things there are out there.
And then they remake themselves. I mean, I'm wondering what we might be seeing in the next few years as, you know, with any luck, you know, I think we've talked about, you know, religion becoming irrelevant. What's going to come up? You know, will now the Hindus, some of these cults start becoming more popular? So we're going to see different stories, and, you know, until it completely goes away, I think we're going to have material for the rest of our lives.
Oh, I'm sure. You know, it's going to be same shit, different religion, but
right.
Hey, that is what it is, unfortunately. Later on in the show, we're going to be joined by Justin Vacula, who had a recent debate with Reverend Michael Brewster on the existence of the Christian God, and I think that's going to be a great story, so everybody make sure you stay tuned. But now I think we should go ahead and get on to the news. And now the news. This time in the news, we've got an all-foreign edition. All of our stories are about religion outside of the United States. So let's begin. As if we haven't talked about this enough, here's another case of the religious abusing children. Physically this time, in Germany. a raid on a Christian cult called the 12 Tribes has resulted in 40 children being taken from their compounds on grounds that they were being beaten with rods. This cult, which claims 3,000 members in 9 countries, has had repeat run-ins with the law, specifically over their practice of beating their children. Cult members, of course, are upset because secular society is getting in the way of their religious traditions. But do we really think that they should have the right to violate secular rules if their religion teaches them to? I vote no.
You gotta vote no for me too. I'm actually, pro spanking, but, open hand, not grabbing, taking a rod to the kid. And, this seems to be like something straight out of the Bible. And I don't know what the extent, I couldn't really tell the extent of the abuse, but I'm assuming it's pretty serious if you got the police involved with it.
Well, they had 100 police raid 2 religious compounds in Germany.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's not the first time. I think it was New York City, actually, took away a bunch of children, fined them thousands of dollars for, violating child labor laws, for forcing their kids to work, at a young age. It's ridiculous. And these people just sit around and go, hey, it's our religion. We can do whatever the hell we want. Well, I'm sorry, but the freedom of religion never includes the freedom to violate the law. It just doesn't do that.
Never has, never will. This is something I can't understand, that, taking the Bible literally, spare the rod, spoil the child type, stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly what they do.
And that's what they do. And they take it to the extreme. With the Jehovah's Witnesses and the blood transfusions. And I think I read an article about, a family, they took, I think it was in Australia, they took a kid and gave him the blood transfusions he needed for his, chemotherapy or something like that. And, it's like these Bible literalists, I don't know how fundamental these people were, but it sounds like their literal word from their book and it's like almost like a justification to abuse their children. And, why in their mind they think this is right, and why are they miffed? Because it almost sounds like they're not even complaining about, the abuse, or complaining about being religiously persecuted.
Oh, it's always religious persecution. And of course they don't care about the abuse. They want the abuse to go on. But there has to be a point in time where you say there's got to be basic standards that no one can violate for any reason, such as basic medical care and physical abuse or sexual abuse. And religion shouldn't be able to just say, hey, I have a belief, therefore I get to break any law I want. This is just stupid.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And yeah, like when we were talking about last week about, just the rules, like Christians complaining about work or diversity, that article, it's like the idea that because of these laws, like here in the United States, again, the claiming of, this is a Christian nation and we should be allowed to do things to our kids, and, and that kind of that mentality, that they found this justification. Their religion says it's okay, and that somehow supersedes law because they hold a moral high ground or something because they are religious. This whole thing just doesn't make sense to me, because, you can't hold anyone to a higher standard or a lower standard when it comes to basic human rights and, these abuses. And,
I agree with you completely. It's just these guys, they think they are asserting that they have a higher moral standard, but their moral standards are certainly not high as far as I'm concerned. These people are just animals.
Yeah. We all adhere to the same moral standards, whether you don't have a book to back them up or you have a book, that says that these are your moral standards. And my morals are not much different. There's no difference between my morals as an atheist and their morals as a Christian or whatever they call themselves. And there shouldn't be any difference. There's no difference.
I disagree with you entirely. I think your morals as an atheist are much better than their morals as Christians, because their morals are based on Bronze Age mythology, whereas yours are based on a rational evaluation of the real world.
Well, I'd like maybe qualify it a little bit, because there is that basic morals. We all have the same thing. It's just that these people have taken it and applied that Bronze Age mentality to their morals. morals are morals are morals, and we all have them. We all, in a way, and because they do make the claim, that the war is bad, killing each other is bad, that type of thing. But it's like, to me, it doesn't matter who you are. I mean, I don't care if you're white, black, male, female, LBGT, whatever religion you have, killing each other, it's an immoral act. They have that same basis. It's just that, but then they apply the Bronze Age attitudes that they're superior, so, brown people don't count, and gay people don't count, and women don't count. That's what I think I'm trying to get at. I mean, I think that makes more sense. No matter what, we should have a basic moral compass. We have it's all pointing the same way.
I don't know that that's true, though.
I'd like to think that, but hey, but like I said, I'd like to think that when we're talking about theists, they like to think they're moral. They do have these basic ideas, but again, because they got a book that tells them that they can beat their kids and buy and sell slaves or not buy and sell slaves and do all this stuff that compounds, that's over the top of basic morals. The basic is there. It's just that they've corrupted them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I don't know that they've corrupted them. The problem is they're just taking this book and they're saying anything in this book we're going to follow. So we're going to do things without ever thinking about whether or not we actually ought to do those things. That's the problem. You think about your morals. They don't.
Right.
And, the people in this story, they're off beating their kids because of one line in a Bronze Age book of mythology. Okay, but they don't bother thinking about whether they should actually follow that book. They follow that book completely without question. The same is true of the faith-healing idiots who follow it because of one line in the Bible. Or, it's like the Muslims. The reason that they go out and marry 6-year-olds, and that's another story in and of itself, they do it because their prophet did it. Well, they never stop to think whether they should do it or whether it was good or bad or right or wrong. They just do it because that's what they're taught to believe. And if you never think about anything you do, then how can you even consider yourself to be moral at all?
Yeah, I can go with that. That's a better explanation than I'm giving. Like I said, I think they've corrupted their morals. I think innately humans are moral creatures just because for survival. But they've taken it and they corrupted it. They don't question what they're doing, and that's why they get in trouble and we don't.
Well, I mean, the problem is that our morals today, I think in general terms, are a lot better than they were 3,000, 4,000 years ago, or however long ago it was in the Bible, depending on what section you're reading. But they're still dealing with morals from 3,000, 4,000 years ago. They're not dealing with what we understand today. I'm sure there's an awful lot of Christians out there who are going, hey, we're completely good with slavery because the Bible says so. Well, you're just an animal. That doesn't mean you're a good person.
Right.
So, all right, you want to hop onto your first story?
Let me hop onto my first story.
Shadiness on the part of Pat Robertson. So there's a new documentary coming out. It's talking about how it's shining new light on some old allegations. Now, I don't know if you remember this, Jake. I remember rumors about this, that he was using money that was initially designated for African refugees, but he was using it instead to support his own interest in diamond mining. Okay, millions of dollars. This documentary apparently came out today at the Toronto International Film Festival, and it talks about, how there are pilots coming out and saying very specifics that they were supposed to be en route to drop off all of these great supplies to these poor African people who were dying in the Rwandan genocide. And instead, Pat Robertson's like, oh no, I'm praying for diamonds. He's wanting his diamonds.
So I remember covering that story when it first came out, and it was amazing. And I'm so glad they did the documentary because they got more into details. And they, as Ebony was referring to, they talked to the helicopter pilots. And the pilots were like, look, we had to tell the story to someone because we couldn't believe it. Yeah. Pat Robertson was on one of the helicopters. So to give you a sense, he goes to a 700 club, and he's a holy man, and he says, oh my God, we're going to help these poor Rwandans. There was a genocide. We need money for helicopters so we can bring in the aid. Apparently they did about 2 or 3 runs to help the victims, and then the rest of the time they used the helicopters to help in diamond mines in Africa that Pat Robertson was financially connected to.
Mission Congo, how Pat Robertson raised millions on the back of a non-existent aid project. This is from The Guardian. The televangelist claimed Operation Blessing was giving vital aid in response to the 1994 Rwandan crisis. A documentary opening at the Toronto Film Festival paints a less flattering picture. And I'm reading this article. I mean, when I read it, I'm like, oh my God, this guy is evil. Not that he's just an asshole and his brain seems to be failing him with the comments. Now apparently a documentary is going to come out and point to how Robertson funneled money to in this article they refer to a Blood Diamonds operation operating in the area, taking the money that was supposed to go to help these refugees and aircraft and diverting them to get mining equipment to this company, diamond mining, basically being paid through a offshore Bahamas account using money collected from his parishioners that was supposed to help the victims of the genocide in Rwanda. And I'm hoping this is true and this documentary blows that whole the 700 Club, the whole thing right out the window. This guy has no shame.
Well, of course he doesn't. Come on, nobody's really surprised that Pat Robertson's a lying crackpot and a piece of shit. He's been doing this for years. Nobody's gonna go, oh crap, we didn't think he was, making all this money and serving his own interests. I mean, it won't discredit him at all because the faithful are always gonna believe Pat Robertson. They're gonna reject the facts because they want to have faith in him. It doesn't really make a damn bit of difference. That's the problem.
Yeah, I'm just hoping, like I said, I'm hoping this is true. I mean, I'm kind of getting a feeling, I got a rough feeling that this may be a little bit too overdone. I mean, a lot of this really sounds really like a real nasty conspiracy theory. But you know what? I'd like to see the documentary. It's supposed to be coming out. I don't know when exactly, but again, when we're talking about morality, it's any moral. There doesn't seem to be any moral anything there in with that guy.
Well, that's true of virtually all televangelists, though. I mean, let's be honest. In every televangelist out there, the largest slice of donations never leaves the church grounds. They go to pay for more money gathering efforts. They go to basically to make more money. They pay an absurd salary to the televangelist, and they build giant golden temples. That's what they do. And every single televangelist you find from, the Crystal Cathedral, when it was the Crystal Cathedral, Benny Hinn, all these people, they all have the same damn problem. And they're all lying to their parishioners. They're all making money hand over fist. They're not giving this stuff to charity. They're just telling people they're giving stuff to charity, and then they're really not doing a whole lot, and they're lining their own nest. That's what they all do. So why is this any surprise?
In a way, it isn't a surprise. I mean, that seems to be over the top. I loved it, the whole thing with was Oral Roberts, and he's told him that if he doesn't make so many millions of dollars from his, that God's going to call him home, that type of stuff,
Adios, asshole.
I remember that whole kind of debacle.
Yeah, and we remember when Jim Baker, he was defrauding people all over the place.
Yeah.
What's the difference? They're all doing it, and you still have these morons following them.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that this story seemed to be like just so much over what these. I mean, this has set the bar higher for these guys. I mean, I'm wondering what his contemporaries are saying. Okay, how can I be even worse than this?
Probably they're going, hell, he's getting away with it. How can I do it?
Yeah, well,
these people are all crooks. They're all crooks.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, Oral Roberts. Let's be honest. Look at all the crap that Jim Baker did. He's got a ministry again, and he's got lots of followers. People don't learn.
Oh, yeah, definitely. What's the other one? Was it him? Or what's the guy? Popoff.
Yeah, Peter Popoff.
Yeah.
Who was revealed to be a complete fraud.
Yes. I think even, was it, Randy?
James Randi, yes.
James, total fraud. Did he do any jail time on that, or?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, cause then he comes back and he's back and people are, loving him. I don't understand when if someone ripped me off like that, why would I even follow them again? But these people, they just write back. It's that mindless, I don't know. I mean, I'd like to say Nazi Germany-ish, this, people following a charismatic leader, doing his bidding, send him money. It keep going over and over again. These guys, they bilk these people. You find out that they use this money for Jessica Hahn. Yeah, of course now this with the, they're calling them blood diamonds. I don't know how technical that is. I thought it was like the armies would, raid these guys that were, these little guys that were mining diamonds out of these rivers and, stealing them and using those diamonds to finance a war. I don't think this necessarily is a blood diamond situation, but it's still him running a diamond operation right next to where one of the worst genocides in Africa, probably to date, probably pretty close, and then claiming that moral high ground again, that we're the better, we're the moral people. It doesn't sink in that this is, these people who follow him, that this is not good. This is like opposite of what your books tells you,
Yeah, but nobody pays attention to the book. Most of the people haven't even read the book. They're just listening to him. And whatever he says, they say, well, that must be what the book says.
Yeah.
And the thing is, this happened in 94, so it happened almost 20 years ago. He's still getting donations for this. He's still getting money for this. And even the people who were there, they're saying, nope, we never saw these people. These people are claiming to have had the largest aid contingent on site, and all the actual doctors are going, nope, they were never there. There was like 7 guys. And Robertson, his side was out there taking pictures of the other doctors, everybody else, and saying, look, there's our doctors. No, it isn't. That's somebody else. That's an actual aid organization doing actual work. You're too busy over there trying to scoop diamonds out of the river. What a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
I bet you he's still getting donations.
Oh yeah. That's the thing that blows my mind about all this. These people do the terriblest thing. They commit they violate the 10 Commandments, all this kind of stuff, and they still want to send money to these guys. Jim Baker, he diddled, Jessica Hahn, had an affair. That's one of these sins that they keep telling their people that they're going to go to hell for. He commits them and somehow, oh no, that's all gone now. That's all behind me. It's like, fuck you.
Yeah, no, it's like you can't just say, I'm sorry, and have it all go away. Although, granted, that is the way Christianity works. Yeah, I just went out and, raped 140 little girls. I shot 700 people. I fleeced little old ladies. But as long as I say I'm sorry, I go to heaven. Well, fuck you, Here, I'll send you there a little faster. Kaboom. Hate stupid people. But of course, he will survive this like he survives absolutely everything else. I mean, let's face it, he's not going to be around for much longer anyway. He's, well, come on, every time we listen to him, and we've done this a lot on this show, we've had him on and he's just like out there ranting and raving in his addled little brain. He's got Alzheimer's or something.
Gotta be something.
Or he's just naturally stupid. I don't know. I don't know if he's any more crazy these days than he ever was, because he's always been pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So, I haven't got a clue.
Me neither.
Alright, so you want to do the next one?
Sure.
Alright.
Yaoundé, Cameroon, CNN. Cameroon's President Paul Biya has ordered the closure of nearly 100 Christian churches in key cities, citing criminal practices organized by Pentecostal pastors that threaten the security of the West African nation. But Pentecostal pastors said the move is evidence of Biya's insecurity about the church's criticism of the government. Biya is using the military to permanently shut down all Pentecostal church denominations in the nation's capital, Yaoundé, and the northwest regional capital, Bamenda, which have the largest Christian populations in Cameroon. More than 50 churches have now been closed, with the government targeting nearly 100 in 8 other regions. We will get rid of all the so-called Christian Pentecostal pastors who misuse the name of Jesus Christ to fake miracles and kill citizens in their churches. They have outstretched their liberty, Mbu Anthony Lang, a government official in Bamenda, told CNN Wednesday. Nearly 500 Pentecostal churches operate in Cameroon, but fewer than 50 are legal, he added. On Sunday, a 9-year-old Christian girl collapsed and died during a prayer session in Winners Chapel, a Pentecostal church in Bamenda. The girl's mother, Teresa, told CNN Wednesday that the pastor intended to cast out the numerous demons that were in control of her daughter's life. I want the government to stop these pastors who use mysterious powers to pull Christians and kill them for more powers. All my children have ran away from the Catholic Church in search for miracles, signs and wonders, she told CNN while holding back tears.
Dozens of Pentecostal churches being shut down in Cameroon. Cameroon's president, Paul Biya, and I probably did not say that right, but that's life, has ordered the closure of all Pentecostal churches in the country. Close to 100 are being shut down, citing criminal practices used by the Pentecostal pastors. Religious leaders claim that the government is afraid of Christianity, but there have been widespread reports of children dying in the churches due to exorcisms, pastors ordering women to divorce their husbands, and other things, not to mention that the overwhelming majority of Pentecostal churches in Cameroon are not authorized by law. Only about 50 of 500 are actually recognized as legal organizations. People have been making makeshift churches set up in their homes just so that they can go out and preach. Do we think this fear is justified, or do we think that the government actually has a good point?
I think they got a good point if they're operating illegally. You know, we're dealing with, I don't know what the kind of laws they have in the country. So, being I don't know if you have to be licensed to operate a church, or you got to be, whatever the rules are. But definitely, because we see in other African countries like Nigeria, these so-called Christians have come in and basically, committed atrocities against their own people. And I don't know, this doesn't sound so bad. Maybe not as bad as what's going on in Nigeria, but people dying at exorcisms, the divorce thing. This article didn't give me a whole lot.
Well, it gets worse. One Pentecostal pastor abducted 30 children against their will in order to, quote unquote, remove them from a bad society. Other pastors are telling the sick to refuse their medical treatments. They're telling cancer patients to refuse their cancer treatments so God can heal them. I mean, they're doing the whole faith healing thing. Right. So there's a lot of that crap going on. Now, I don't know if it has anything to do with any political mumbo-jumbo, but it does seem to me that only the Pentecostals are being picked on here. The Catholics, the Muslims, no other Christian group is being told they have to shut down. It only seems to be this group, and only because they're killing people.
Right.
It's not like Cameroon isn't like most other places in Africa. You already mentioned Nigeria and a lot of those. They're really screwed up. They still believe in demons and witchcraft. There was a recent fire where people were convinced it was set by goblins. This is a really fucked up country. And, having people who believe all this nonsense to be told by the religious that, now they can't get medical treatment, or now they have to divorce their husbands or divorce their wives or go through exorcisms or any of this crap. I'm sure they're better off without it.
Right. Yeah, I'm just, trying to think about this a little bit because, picking on the Pentecostals, the ones I know here, they're not a bunch, no doubt. But apparently even in Africa, I think it almost sounds like they're, they take on the Western religion names, but they still seem to, practice many of the, or at least incorporate some of the old superstitions that they were accustomed to, which is, all that kind of stuff. So.
Oh yeah, but you have to remember that in expanding, Catholicism always encouraged people to do that. Catholicism would always go into an area and they would pick a bunch of things that they could grab. That's where Christmas came from. It was, it was a pagan, it was a pagan celebration, but they said, aha, we can take this and co-opt it into Christianity. Or, that's where you get a lot of the saints, where they would just take local deities and local respected people, and they would go, aha, we'll just call these people saints so that these people will be easier to convert. So yeah, in Africa, there's a lot of Christian, Catholic witches, that are out there casting spells on each other. It's really just absurd.
Yeah. And, I mean, maybe they're going after the worst, and then it filters down to the other religions. Maybe that's what's happening. We're just seeing the early stages of a major crackdown on the weird religious practices. Maybe definitely, just picking on one, I don't think is right. I mean, they should be picking on all of them or none of them.
Well, why? These guys are the ones that are actually hurting anybody.
Right.
The other ones aren't really. I mean, the president of the country is a Catholic, I think. So it's not like he's just out there going, I hate all religion. He's going out, it's the same reason why you would pick on the faith healing churches that are killing their kids.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's maybe they're dialing up. They're just starting. Maybe this is the first feelers for a major crackdown on the, not necessarily religion in itself, but the illegal practices amongst the other religions. This may be just an early attempt to get a feel for what the country is going to react. If you start going after any of the bigger religions in the country, will that create, they may be concerned about starting a civil war or something like that. I don't know. That doesn't sound right. If they're going to crack down on Pentecostals, and if that's a large contingent, it may start a revolution or a civil war in that country. So African politics is so weird to me. I'm trying to be careful how I say when I talk about it, because is this like a beginning of a major crackdown? Is this part of or is this just the leadership, who may be predominantly Catholic, has decided, let's wipe out the Pentecostals? I don't know what the political side to this, because, definitely bad things were happening. I don't want to point to Pentecostals in Cameroon as the only people doing bad things to each other, and so that's why I'm kind of wondering what might be. Is this a beginning of something, or is this just, this is it? Where, the Pentecostals have crossed the line. They're killing. They're causing harm. We got to stop it, or at least stop the practices.
Yeah, well, from what I understand, Pentecostals represent a fairly sizable percentage of the population. They are a huge religion there. But let's be honest. If they're really doing what they're doing, and I've heard a lot of really horrible stories about what they're doing. Yeah. Just like, we report this kind of stuff on the show all the time. I can understand maybe the government has gone to them a lot of times and said, guys, we cannot allow this. This is not what is going to be acceptable. And they've just kind of thumbed their nose at the government and said, screw you, we're going to do what we want to do. And now it's time for the government to just say, all right, fine, we gave you a chance. We tried. Now we're going to take you out. Which I'm not arguing against. I think that's a good thing. I wish we would outlaw all these faith-healing lunatic religions in this country, but, not my country to talk about, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's the other thing. I don't know how the people there, it's kind of hard to understand. For Americans, we're immersed in our country, what is really going on over there. Is what's going on over there fair, or is it not so fair, I guess? I don't know.
Well, it's really up to them to decide how they want to run their own country. Yeah. Certainly, I don't want to pretend like I can impose my views from here on them. Right. But, they get to make their own decisions. That's called free governance, and that's the way it goes. And I don't know whether I support them or not, because my view really doesn't mean a damn thing to them.
Right. But yeah, definitely, I really, deep down though, I'm glad that they're recognizing that this is a dangerous, there's a dangerous situation there that these religions, we see it all the time, that religion has caused suffering, pain, deaths, and they're recognizing that a particular religion is causing these same problems. Unfortunately, we can't outlaw that. We can't outlaw those religions, because they're protected and whatever. But they can, and apparently that's what they're doing. So, I guess it's okay. It's just, being an American, we've got the freedom to be stupid to ourselves, I guess. As long as we don't harm anyone else, I guess then.
Even if you harm other people, you have the right to be stupid. That's the problem.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's go ahead and finish up our last story then.
Okay, from Mother Jones. Oh my God, why end-time buffs are freaking out over Syria. Novelist Joel Rosenberg has the ear of Rick Santorum, Rick Perry, and the Heritage Foundation. He thinks the conflict in Syria was foretold by the Old Testament. In early 2012, best-selling novelist Joel Rosenberg came to Capitol Hill for a meeting with an unidentified member of Congress to discuss the end of the world. I thought the topic was going to be the possible coming of war between Israel and Iran, Rosenberg explained on his website. Instead, the official asked, what are your thoughts on Isaiah 17? I wish I would have picked up and read Isaiah 17. I think, what is it? It has something to do with war in Syria, something would trigger the end of the world or something like that, or trigger the end times. And I kind of grabbed this because, this sounds, an awful lot like the conspiracy theories. There's the, what's the bunch that are trying to get the, temple in Jerusalem rebuilt so it would trigger the end times.
There's a lot of groups that want to do that.
Yeah. And when I read this, it's like, okay, I'm kind of surprised I'm not seeing a lot in the conspiracy, pipeline yet on this, other than the fact that, guys like Alex Jones have been saying things like, it wasn't the Syrian government, it was the Syrian rebels that have used the, gas, which may be, but, I'm going to guess that Syria may have, they used to have ties with the Soviet Union. I wonder if the Soviet Union gave them some stuff and they've been just, maintaining their stock. But anyhow.
Well, we're even seeing right now, there's reports coming out of the UN that there was no gas attack at all.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, so, the whole story may be all messed up anyhow, so it's I think it's kind of cool that we're not going to, or at least we're backing off a little bit, but definitely, I don't know, maybe just the threats was enough to get people talking again or something like that. Of course, anything that goes on in the Middle East seems to be like, oh yeah, this is the first sign of, the tribulation, or this is going to be whatever the revelations or whatever the end story you're into. And when I saw this, I was like, okay, cool. So now we got Syria as the possible, the trigger of the end of the world. Everything seems to be the end of the world type talk, just depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah, well, you got to remember the only reason Christians in America give a damn about Israel at all is because Israel represents the material component for their summon Jesus spell. They don't give a crap about Israel. They don't. All they're playing nice with the Jews until such a time as the Jews can get slaughtered and, bring Jesus back. That's it. Let's be honest. All right? They don't want anybody taking out Israel before they get to.
Right. Yeah, because I was watching that. What was it? The guy, Tony Robbins? What's the Baldrick from Blackadder? And he was doing this interview. He was talking to, these end timer. They're trying to, it's these Americans that have been going over to Israel and trying to push to have the temple built because it bring the second coming of Jesus. And
good luck on that since it's under the fucking Muslim Dome of the Rock.
Yeah. Yeah, because he talked to the Muslims and says, there's no fucking way you're going to be building anything on our side of the, the rock, and, it was all, it was like a really, it was on, I saw it online somewhere. I don't know if it was YouTube, but maybe I'll try to find it. But it was really cool. It was like, it got into the, these people and they were like dead set. I mean, I guess it's a lobby. They lobbied Washington about wanting to get the temple built. I'm like, because what they're talking about is the end of the world. I mean, that seems to be the thing when Jesus shows up, and, we're all raptured off and all that kind of stuff. It's like, oh my God, are you people that crazy? And even just, I was trying to remember what show it was. They were talking about even just excavating around the Temple Mount, those areas can potentially trigger a war. I mean, it's like, they got the permits to do it was some dig, I'm trying to remember if it was, in the temple, or the old temple underneath, there's some passages, and they were gonna clear away some of it, and, they got permission. Then all of a sudden, someone thought instead of turning left in their dig, they turned right or whatever it was, and decided to kill the whole thing, and created a whole international incident over kind of a mistake. But then they ended up having to stop. They had to wait, and they wait years, and then pretty much they give up on it. But it's like, these people wanting to start Armageddon, and like, you really want that? And apparently, yeah, it's Jesus coming home. We'll bring them back and fixing the world.
Yeah, well, you got to remember that all this stuff really kind of goes back to like Hal Lindsey in the early 70s. Hal Lindsey, he was a Texas preacher who has a massive Israel fetish. He wrote books like The Late Great Planet Earth, things like that. And he's been wrong about every damn thing he's ever written. Everything he's ever written, he's been completely wrong about. But he's got this fanatical belief that Israel's the key to everything, and he wants the end of the world to come so everybody can go to heaven. And all the predictions he made, like in Late Great Planet Earth, have been proven wrong. He's so sure that they're all going to come true that he's gone back and revised Late Great Planet Earth a couple of times to cover up all the bad predictions he's already made.
Right.
I mean, that kind of strikes me as being like the crazy end of the world kind of people who just keep changing their predictions every time their date passes.
Right.
And this stuff, it goes down the line. Lindsay was a major influence on like Jerry Jenkins and Tim LaHaye, who did the Left Behind series. They're doing more Armageddon porn. And, they've got millions of people following around because of all this ridiculous, religious arguments. I mean, you even get the modern day Christian dominionists who are really hot for this kind of crap. And they're the ones who think Christians ought to be in charge of everything and run the world.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I kind of like this story. It did have a little bit of a conspiracy, because there's always seems to be this, I don't know, there's the Israel connection. I mean, the Zionist, there's the Zionist conspiracy, there's, or the protocols, the supposed, the Jewish takeover of the world, and some people equated that to it as the end of the world type stuff, and I was kind of hoping for a Syria conspiracy.
Well, I mean, it's religious lunacy, The thing I'm really wondering is whoever this unnamed government official that the guy went to go see, why the hell is this idiot in office? I mean, anybody who is going to be calling up religious crazies to come talk about religious craziness on the taxpayer dime, what the hell? Why does this guy have a job? I mean, I do not want people who believe this crap being in office. I'm sorry, I just don't,
Yeah, I mean, that's, that's worse than having a communist, I think, because they're, if they get the right, the right, omens come up and the planets align the way they think they're supposed to align, they can, nuke the world. And it's like, oh my God, that could be, and it's all based on, some scribbling from 3,000 years ago. It's like, oh, come on, that's not a way to I don't know.
That's not a way to run a country.
Yeah.
But then again, I guess if you look at it, most countries are being run that way these days. You've got the religious in power, and the religious tend to be the crazies. They tend to be the extremists. It doesn't tend to be a lot of the really moderate, liberal theists. It's the people out there like Rick Perry and all the rest of this nonsense who are banging the drum for the end of the world and how they can best bring it about. Why? I don't want these people anywhere close to having a finger on the button.
Yeah.
Any button. Pick any button. They cannot have their fingers on it.
Yeah.
It just drives me crazy. It really, really does. The planet is going to hell if such a place existed. And the religious are the ones dragging us there going, come on, let's go faster.
Yeah. Yeah, because that seems to be to me, it seems to be opposite. If you know that, apparently the books that, Revelation says the world's supposed to end and all that stuff. It's like, okay, so why would you want it to end? And why push push it forward. That does not make sense at all to me. And other than the fact that these are people who think Jesus is God, so, it's.
Yeah, they think Jesus is coming back and they want to be first in line.
Yeah.
Well, dude, here, take this gun, put it in your mouth, pull the trigger, then you can go do your thing.
Yeah.
You want the world to end? Here, let's end your world right now and leave it alone for the rest of us because we don't want your shit.
Yeah. What was it was it Family Guy or American Dad where it was like Pat Robertson and Jerry Falwell were the only ones left on the earth after the rapture. I think it was Family or American Dad. It was like they're the only two left after the rapture, and they go, "We hated the right people. Why didn't we go?"
Yeah, they can go, all right. Yeah. Please go far, go way over there, far, far, far away.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, dude, you want a diamond mine in Africa? Go there. Just go far away from TV cameras. We just don't want to have to deal with you anymore.
Yeah. And just think he ran for president. Oh my God.
At least he lost.
Yes.
It could be worse. He could have won.
Yeah.
But no, at least we're not that crazy as a culture.
Thank God.
We weren't crazy enough to elect Rick Perry. We aren't crazy enough to do anything with Sarah Palin. We aren't crazy enough to do with anything with the ultra religious wingnut nincompoops.
Yeah. What was happening with Bachman? I remember there was that, I think we talked about that video, or I haven't had the chance to take a look at that or see if there's anything there. I'd like to know, if she's really that, hopefully that kills her, because that whole election and the crap that was coming out of those people's mouths, I hate, it made me hate to be a Republican. I really hated,
Yeah, they were trying to out crazy all the rest of the crazies.
Yeah.
Well, if they do, that's fine, because that killed the campaign for every single one of them. Every single one that was throwing around God, they all lost. They didn't get to run. So, that's fine. If you want to jump up there and dance around on the stage like a monkey carrying a cross and knock yourself out, because you're just proving to Americans that you're not qualified for the job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, I keep getting all these stupid GOP come out and support Bibles and Christianity and all this crap, and I keep sending back going, no, you people are idiots. This is why you keep losing. What the hell is wrong with you people?
Because after the elections, they were trying. I was watching this stuff, and there were people trying to figure out what went wrong for the Republicans, and they said nothing about religion. It was not enough money. There was, they couldn't get the voter base interested. I'm like, dude, didn't you see what you were saying on TV and other Republicans coming in? And you were talking stupid. I want to say maybe even, like if it was like, if these guys, like they're running like before the Civil War, it's like, there was all the slavery stuff that this one guy that slavery was good. It's like, oh my God, don't you listen to what you say? It's like the crap that was coming out of your mouth turned off. It turned off me, and I like to think of myself pretty conservative, and I do I tend to vote Republican, but with a good conscience, I couldn't do it. Because of the stupidity.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I know I talked about this a long time ago, back in the early days of the podcast. But right after the election, the GOP sent out, or they had an online survey for Republicans to, explain what they thought went wrong with the election. So I got on there and I answered the whole thing, and I said the whole problem was your reliance on religion. And I said, and I know for a fact you will pay no attention to anything I say, because I'm telling you the truth. I'm not telling you what you want to hear, but your pushing religion at every turn is what killed you for that election. And it will kill you for every single election from now until the end of time. The Republicans will never hold high national office so long as they are not conservatives. And you guys are not conservatives. And, of course, they, almost immediately after that survey, they came back and said, well, look, everybody said we should be all about God and country and blah, 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 blah. And they don't listen to people. They just, it's just an echo chamber. That's all it is. They hear what they want to hear. So, it's sad, but yeah, the Republican Party, I want the Republican Party to completely fragment anyway. I think we really do need to have, a conservative party, whatever you want to call it, an actual conservative party that's conservative across the board, and then you can have the religious wingnut party that becomes irrelevant, and then we probably need to split the Democrats up into another party or two. But, unfortunately, this two-party system is really killing us, especially when both parties are insane.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, that may be the key, just to get people interested in getting voting and maybe getting, decent people, and knowing that when you lose, you're losing because, I think with this two-party setup, if you lose an election, well, why did you lose? Was it because I wasn't religious enough? Was I too liberal, too conservative? Was I easy on minorities, or was I tough on, you almost can't tell, because there's just so much that these parties are trying to embrace. I mean, if we could split it up, maybe more parliamentarian, or, where you run as, your locals run as particular parties, and, then they all meet in Washington and form a government from, the different, so whatever the majority, they could form up a government, bring some of the minority in, and, form up a government. I mean, we'd still elect a president or whatever, but at least Congress is at least, maybe a little bit more in tune to the American people. And maybe that might stir up some interest in government. Hey, now my voice can be heard if I run, type of thing, so.
Yeah, but you know that nobody going to Washington gives crap one about the people. None of them care. They're there to feather their own nest and to increase their own power, and that's all they give a crap about. They said whatever comforting words they had to say to get elected, but the second the second the election is done, fuck the people. The people don't matter.
Right. But I'm thinking, if it became now more important to follow up on what you told the people, I mean, then that could make a difference. Because right now there's really you don't know who you made happy and who you didn't make happy. So it's like, okay, well, I can probably go to Washington and, I can do whatever I want, and unless my constituents really hate something I do, I probably won't hear anything about it, or who knows, maybe their underlings will shield. I don't know if but anyhow, maybe now that's, since you're running as, a conservative versus a Green Party, I don't know how many parties. I mean, I think there's quite a few in England. You got your conservatives. I mean, you can run communists if you wanted, and
there are at least 7 communist parties in the U.S.
Yeah, but you can run as, as these different parties, Green, Libertarian. You can run as these different parties. Now you kind of know who your base is, and the base knows who you are, because you're running because you're saying, hey, I believe in, these ideals. So people know more about who they're sending to Washington, and Washington knows that they were sent by these people, because, it still has to be a majority vote type of thing. So now you got a better connection to, right now, I mean, you vote Republican, okay, so what am I getting? What am I getting out of this Republican? Am I getting a crazy wingnut religious nut job, or am I getting conservative, moderate conservative? He's okay with, certain things, or, that you don't know what you're getting when you vote today. You don't know what you're getting when you vote for, the guy that you like, because he could be anything, and he can get away with anything because he may assume that, well, you're crazy. I'm, whatever. I don't know what the best way to say it, but, but if you're running like as a libertarian, or you're running as a moderate Republican, or you run under, then you understand who you're actually sending, and why you're being sent, because you are a moderate. You talk like a moderate, Republican. So you know what you have to do when you get to Washington. I don't know. I mean, it's just thoughts.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I was even thinking, wouldn't it be cool if once a month the entire country could vote on their representatives, and those representatives that had a certain number of bad votes for them, got suspended and they couldn't do anything for a month. Although I suspect the entire government would be suspended permanently.
Right. A monthly recall vote. Automatic. Yeah. Just automatic. If you want to, go into your polling place. If you like, vote of confidence or no confidence. I mean, that's how Parliament, that's how Parliament works. I think. I don't know exactly how England and Canada, how their government operates, but I'm assuming that if something really bad happens, you can get a vote of no confidence that dissolves the government, and they got to go into election and form a new government.
Yeah, but we'd be doing that every other day. Nobody likes our government, no matter, nobody ever likes our government.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but it's nice to think about at least.
But what we were just talking about seems more of a part of a rant than talking about Syria.
Well, it's okay. We do a lot of rants on this show. It's not a problem at all.
Yeah.
Rants are good.
Yeah.
People seem to like our rants for some weird reason. I don't know. We just go off on all these bizarre tangents and just talk for a while, and every now and then we rein it in and try to come back to what we were talking about.
Right.
Yeah. Are you for going into Syria? Let's go back to Syria.
Am I for going after Syria? I've had it with war. We've gone to, let's see, we've done Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya. Now we're going to go after Syria. I think America needs to sit back and say, hey, unless you really want us there, unless we're really needed, if there was really a chemical attack, whatever, I say we stay out. We figure out a way to get out of that region and let those people solve their problems. If we need to be ready to help, I think wouldn't be a bad idea. But as far as Egypt's going through their hassles, they don't seem to want us there.
Well, nobody ever wants us there. Iraq didn't want us there. Afghanistan didn't want us there. Libya wanted us to take out the Looney Tune, but we didn't do any good for them. We haven't done good for any of these countries. None of these countries have become better places because we were there. In fact, we're just over there pissing everybody off. And in Syria, first off, it's not our damn problem. Secondly, if we do go in there, there is no good side to fight for. You're stuck between, Assad and his evil and the Muslim terrorists. Well, can we just kill both sides? How about if we just wipe out both sides across the board and we just say, hey, we've got a new state? That'd be fine. You want to do that? Cool. I think we should go around the world, and any country that we attack, we just let them know up front, we'll come in and help you, but when you're done, you're going to be a tax-paying state of the United States forever. And see how many people want us to come in. Because you won't find many.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I don't know why we do this. We go into these countries, and this is just pretty much everything. Even going back to the Spanish-American War, we've gone into these countries, for whatever the reason. I mean, we went into Cuba because of Spain allegedly mistreatment of the Cuban population. There are those who believe that our intervention in Cuba was to secure, plantations. And we go into these countries, and we basically go in there, we fight the war, and then it's like, then comes the end game. We have to close up the problem. We did pretty decent in World War II, mainly because, rebuilding Germany, rebuilding Europe, rebuilding Japan. But then again, I think that worked, but for some reason, when it comes to our war, we fought in Nicaragua, Haiti, Dominican Republic, Grenada wasn't so bad, but still, Iraq twice, Afghanistan, Korea. It seems like somehow we don't finish the job. We don't do the job right in the first place. We mess up a little bit, and then when it comes time to...
Well, we don't even have a clear idea of what the job is to begin with.
Well, there's that, but then when we don't know when it's done, we may have been done within weeks. We should have been out of there, but we're there. We're trying to build roads. We're trying to build schools, which in Afghanistan that seems to be what we're trying to do. But they need money to do that, and that means U.S. aid, and getting that U.S. aid. Of course, that's a whole ugliness in itself. Half of it doesn't reach the country.
We can't afford it anyway. We can't afford it.
Yeah. Just the stuff we've done, we don't do it right. I think at one point it may have been the right thing to do, but we just screw it up. We fuck up and, we decide, okay, yeah, we're done here. Let's go home. And the coups we've, been involved with, Chile, Iran. We put the worst people in office. I mean, Afghanistan. We helped the Mujahideen kick out the Russians, and who do we enlist? The same fuckers that are shooting at us now and blowing up blew up our World Trade Center.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, couldn't there have been a better way of working with those people? Was there something, if they, I don't know, but it seemed like, we did it. We pumped money into gave arms to those people. Then we bailed out. We just walked away, left Afghanistan to its own ends. And so they get pissed off at us. There's a reason why they're ticked off at us. Why not deal with that, the root cause, instead of saying, okay, now we got to go over there and kill those people because somehow we pissed them off. It's just no sense.
Yep.
And all we're doing is throwing money after, dollar after dollar. Afghanistan is really looking a lot like another Vietnam. And of course, they sell us these wars that it won't be another Vietnam. It's like, okay, well, we got another one on our hands.
Yeah.
So it's like, come on.
Well, I mean, the problem is that we go into these things with really bad expectations. We expect the people to ride us around on their shoulders and be really thankful. They don't want us there. They've never wanted us there. They might want us to come in and fight their little battles for them, but they don't want us there, in the long term. And so long as that's the case, so long as we're going in and doing things that the people really don't want us to do, it's no wonder that half the planet is pissed off at us. And I don't know how we're ever going to change that until we change our perspective on running around playing the planet's policeman. But anyway, we should probably get on to the main event and our special guest.
This is the main event.
And joining us today is special guest and atheist activist Justin Vacula. Welcome aboard, Justin.
Thanks for having me on.
At the end of last month, you had a debate with Reverend Michael Brewster. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the debate, how it was set up, and how you think it went?
That's right. On August 31st, I had a debate, Does the Christian God Exist?, with Pastor Michael Brewster from Mount Zion Baptist Church in Wilkes-Barre. I initially approached him with an invitation for a debate at the National Day of Prayer event that was held on Wilkes-Barre's public square, as people from his congregation and many others in the area had joined hands in prayer to commemorate the National Day of Prayer. He said he was interested in the debate. We worked on some planning, and everything went pretty swimmingly. We had the debate inside his church. About 75 people showed. I did a live broadcast online, and we're having the conversation about it today.
Excellent, excellent. Now, we did sit down and we watched the debate, and I've got to say, I think it suffered from a lot of the same kind of problems that all religious debates do. And I think you made some really, really excellent points that he was never able to counter. I think you really blew him pretty much out of the water. And I understand that he's not a professional debater or anything like that, but to be perfectly honest, I don't think he really had anything to say that you didn't just knock out of the ballpark.
Well, I was actually disappointed that he hadn't responded to one of my arguments. I provided two main arguments in the debate. One was the problem of natural suffering, which, to put it quite shortly, is that the evidence of egregious suffering in the universe through natural disasters, diseases, animal predation is incompatible with an all-loving, all-powerful, and all-knowing God. And the second argument was the argument from divine hiddenness, that under Pastor Brewster's idea of God, God wants everyone to come to know him and go to heaven rather than go to hell for disbelieving. And I argued that if this is the case, we should expect some pretty obvious evidence that God exists, and there would be no reasonable non-belief. And since this is not the case, we can conclude that God does not exist. So I put these two arguments forth, and in response to the problem of evil, we heard nothing throughout the debate. And in response to the problem of divine hiddenness, it was more along the lines of, well, you can come to know God if you truly search, and God is too big to understand. We can't know the mind of God, and that was about all that I heard in response.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think he didn't really address anything that you really said. One of the things that I noticed that he did, and this is kind of the same thing that most theists do, is he just went around and made a bunch of claims about the Christian God. This God has these characteristics and this and that, and he wants this, and he does all this stuff. How does he actually know any of that? Where does he get this information? Where is this evidence that any of these things are true? You know, that's like saying, well, Lord Voldemort wants this and does this and believes this, and you don't have any evidence that Lord Voldemort or the Christian God actually are real. He's assuming a priori that God is real in a debate where he's supposed to be showing that God is real.
Right. He even said so much that he presupposes the Christian Bible is true. I had asked, well, you can have, he made, 2 or 3 arguments. He put forth 2 or 3 arguments in his opening statement. One was essentially a cosmological argument. Another was a moral argument. And the other had something to do with, consciousness and logical absolutes and things like that. I said, well, you can run these cosmological arguments, these moral arguments, but I don't see how it gets us to the Christian God. I find those arguments to be very lacking, but before even addressing some of the claims and the points in the arguments, I don't think it gets us to the Christian God. At most, it can get us to a creator or maybe a transcendent mind if we were to accept the moral argument. But it's one thing to argue for deism, and it's another to argue for the Christian God.
Exactly. I mean, you can get up to, well, there might be something here, and then they take this huge leap of logic to, well, therefore it's this entity, and they never are able to fill in those gaps.
Right. And Pastor Brewster during the debate also had mentioned religious experience, and I challenged him to demonstrate how his belief is more irrational than another's religious belief. If he's going to use this epistemology of religious experience such that I've had this experience, I've witnessed God, well, we see that many other people throughout the world are using the same thought process and they're arriving at different conclusions. And they happen to be Muslim, Hindu, Jewish, whatever happens to be the case. So this obviously can't be reliable if people are arriving at different conclusions. And if we're to just take these personal experience claims on face value, we would have contradictory statements here. They all can't be true, but they certainly all can be false.
Right.
That's the one thing. You can have these experiences, sure, but does this even mean also that a God exists? You can interpret it in different ways, and people even come to the conclusion that there is no God when they have these experiences. So that's really problematic.
Right. I mean, 2 theists could have the exact same experience, and both of them would identify a different God as being responsible for that experience.
That's right. And that should lead us to tremendous doubt, at least when considering the specifics of a deity. And this debate was about, does the Christian God exist? So I really kept him to that, about these specific claims, rather than just being very vague about things.
Right. Hey, jump in there, Mike.
I'm digging this. I'm kind of new to the atheist world, I guess. But I've done 10 of these shows, and I'm still learning. And that was the nice thing about this debate, was I learned an awful lot about some of the inner workings of how to understand God, or how they understand God, you know, that whole, and you were bringing him to task, how does he believe? And I noticed he didn't really want to answer some of that part. Does that make sense, or?
Yeah, it really needs more than I just believe, or I had this religious experience, or as he said, the law of cause and effect. This really doesn't do enough. And I think the question to pose to theists when talking about these issues is, how do you know? Where does that information come from? And that's some of the most important things, because the conversations can often go on these tangents about cosmology or morality, which I really tried to avoid during the debate. I had said, well, I don't need to give an accounting for morality. That's secular or atheist friendly. It's up to you to demonstrate that morality leads to the Christian God exists. And I didn't hear a compelling case for that.
Yeah, I think the funniest thing was when you were doing the question and answer period at the end, he completely refused to answer any questions. He said, well, I'm just not going to talk about that.
Well, to be more clear about what happened there, because I don't know if you've seen the video, you certainly didn't see the questions after the fact, unless you saw some of the screenshots I uploaded, or the pictures, I uploaded. Many of the questions, as the moderator said, I thought the moderator did a great job. The moderator was pretty fair during the debate. The questions were just general things of, what's your backstory? Do you believe in life after death? And this really didn't have much to do with the debate, so the moderator was right on that. But I would have liked to just address them during the Q&A anyway, but Pastor Brewster just wasn't interested in doing that for some reason, which is kind of unfortunate, because many people were interested in these ideas to write the questions, although they were not so relevant to the debate.
Yeah, but the question that was asked about slavery,
Oh, yes.
And he just says, well, that doesn't have anything to do exactly with this debate. Therefore, I'm just not going to address it at all. It really came off as somebody who's just afraid to tackle a difficult question.
Yeah, and I really thought it did have something to do with the debate, and I brought this up because he actually brought slavery into the discussion. When he's talking about morality, he said, well, how do we know that slavery is right? Is it just what people say that they prefer it, or whatever the case? Something along that lines. He was essentially making the case that if the Christian God does not exist, all morality is relative. It's just a matter of preference, or someone likes that certain thing. And he said, well, how do we know that slavery is wrong? And I brought up, well, you say that the Christian God is the standard for morality. He's this lawgiver, but yet the Bible endorses slavery and talks about rules for slavery, and that's a big problem. So we could rule that God out, and that's why I thought it was very relevant to the debate.
Yeah, I thought a number of the questions were very relevant because it was the kind of things you were talking about. I mean, he never established that God is real. He never came close. He never even really addressed it at all. He provided no evidence. He provided no logical arguments. He really didn't do a whole lot. And then when it came down to talking about the consequences of the things that you did discuss, he just kind of chickened out of the whole thing and said, well, I just don't want to deal with it. Well, then why are you having this debate, pal?
Yeah. Well, to his credit, this was the first debate that he had ever done. He said that he wasn't very confident going into it because he's new to this experience and he's not well versed in apologetics and he's mostly preaching. That's what he does. So it was very courageous for him to accept this debate. He was the second local person to accept my debate challenge that I'd put out. And he was very good at hosting the event. The staff was very accommodating and everything worked out pretty well on the organizational end. So it was pretty brave for him to come up and defend his ideas. Although I would think that, since he's preaching for so long, or any of these religious folk in the area who've been preaching for quite a while, they find this to be really important, that it should really be no problem to defend the belief. I would hope, at least, since they put so much stock in it and they dedicate a significant portion of their life to it. And we can always throw in my favorite Bible verse, which is 1 Peter 3:15, which is, if anyone asks you for the reason for your faith or hope in your heart, depending on the translation, prepare a defense and do so with gentleness and respect. So right there, the Bible tells Christians to have reasons for their beliefs and defend their beliefs when asked.
Right. Well, it even sounds to me like the moderator, was he like a pastor at that church as well?
Oh, he was a pastor at a different church.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I knew he was a pastor. I just didn't know where he was. But it sounded to me, as he's asking Brewster, please say something. Like he's just begging him, come on, you've got to make a better showing of this. He just kept going on and on going, well, maybe you might consider talking about something. It sounded like he was kind of embarrassed by the whole showing.
Yeah, that's interesting. Although, like I said, he was pretty fair and the discussion went on well. There was another point in the debate where, as the moderator called it, a prayer section was getting pretty active. When Pastor Brewster was speaking, there were people who were amening. There were people who were applauding at points, and there was that was pretty loud. And the moderator had asked the audience to save their reaction until after each speaker had concluded statements. So that was really nice, and that kept it along pretty well, especially since I was there in the church, so it was his home turf, so to say, as many from his congregation were there.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think you deserve credit for walking into the lion's den.
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, coming from the beginning, I had talked to Pastor Brewster when he had asked about why I want to even do this. I said, I like this because it allows for educational opportunities for people to interact with ideas and research these matters after the debates, engage in these conversations with their neighbors, friends, family, and just doubt. And not only for the religious to doubt, but also atheists to engage with the arguments that religious believers are putting forth. And I'm sure there are many people who are, for lack of a better term, undecided, who will come into the debate. They're not so committed to any particular theological or philosophical positions, and they're just generally interested in the topic. So I think there was a lot of good that came out of this event. It also represented a civil discussion. Some people might have ideas that atheists are really nasty and you can't talk to them and they're just so aggressive and they're going to be mean to people. And this was a very cordial event. Many people after the debate came up to me and were chatting, asking me questions, and people were pretty nice. So it was pretty good.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me. I saw some of your comments afterwards, and you said somebody came up to you and told you you won or you did the right thing, or
Yeah. There was a woman who said that she was frequent in Pastor Brewster's church, and she thought that I was right, and it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I wonder if she's going back.
I don't know, but people do have my contact information, so if she ever wants to get in touch, she certainly has that.
Yeah, so in generally you would say that probably nobody or very few people ever change their mind based on what you said?
Well, you can't really know. I mean, you can't really get in touch with people after the fact, and everyone isn't necessarily going to get in touch with you. And there's possible for people to go from, say, very fundamentalist positions to, say, more moderate or more reasonable positions. Say the young earth creationist will start challenging his or her belief and move toward maybe a theistic evolution belief or something like that. Or even just consider these ideas and see atheists as people just like everyone else. So that's the satisfaction, I think, and the winning of the debate, if there's any winning. And yeah, you can't really know if people change, but you can always plant the seed and encourage people to think about topics. Consider people who maybe have a teacher in elementary school, high school, college, and that person can really have an impact and really lead you down a certain path or have you think about a certain item or become passionate about a certain issue, and it could happen for anyone in that church hall.
Yeah. Well, this just came out of the blue. I was just kind of wondering what kind of church or what kind of Christian denomination does Brewster have?
Is Baptist.
Okay, so I mean it is. Oh yeah, that's right. I do remember seeing that. So it is more of a pseudo-fundamentalist kind of thing. You know, not like a really liberal kind of Christian.
Right. Yeah, it's not so much a liberal Christian denomination. No, it's more of like a Bible-based, we believe the Bible is literally true kind of deal. Although I'm not really sure what that means, because there are many who will just honestly say, yeah, that part is metaphorical. So if you consider a lot of the Bible to be metaphor, you can't really say it's literally true. But as far as Brewster is concerned, he believes in a literal Garden of Eden, a literal global flood, and things like that. So maybe that can put him on the barometer somewhere.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I think that's a good thing. Since you've been through this now, and I know you've done other debates, but has it changed your view of doing debates with theists? I mean, I know that Brewster did his best, and I give him all the credit in the world for being brave enough to go out, especially with his lack of experience and all that. Mm-hmm. But I'm sure that you've seen these kind of debates over and over and over, and pretty much all Christians perform, in my opinion, equally badly. Do you think you could ever have a debate on any of these subjects and actually have it come out to something meaningful or worthwhile, or, have them perform better?
Well, I would think that if people look at the events after the fact, as these are recorded and archived and everything like that, people can look back at the arguments, analyze them, and it's not so much in the heat of the moment where you're in the audience or you're at the podium and you only have so much time to write things down and respond. We could look at the arguments and how it went after the fact. I mean, one thing that I've changed in my argumentation is just language. When I talk about the problem of natural suffering, I avoid calling it the problem of evil, because it seems to go on these distracting conversations. Oh, well, you're using the terms good and evil, and aren't those Christian ideas? And how could you say something is evil? What basis do you have to claim that? And I've since changed my language with that. And I've also focused more on epistemology, on how do we know what we know in the debates, in my rebuttals. And now, after this debate, I'm also considering, instead of responding point to point so much on certain arguments, I will give a summary of my opponent's arguments, because arguments aren't always presented in a very simple fashion. They're assumptions that aren't necessarily voiced, and you have to put them together. So it can be a good thing to summarize it for the audience so that everyone has a clear picture of what's being discussed, including the person at the other podium.
Right. I mean, so many people, especially in religious debates, they will practice the Gish Gallop and just go out throwing out all kinds of assertions, knowing that you could never possibly talk about all of them. And then they'll come back and say, see, look, I must be right because they had no response to this, that, and the other. And I think it was funny in this debate where he really didn't bother responding to anything that you had to say. That's got to bother you or bother him.
I was expecting certain responses, and I was prepared to address certain things that I anticipated him saying. And during the rebuttals, since those things weren't said, and since there were no or very little very few objections raised to the problem of natural suffering, I had to use my rebuttal time for other things. And I was thinking that I would use my rebuttal in response to what he had said, but it was just more of him reinforcing points rather than responding to my arguments, which I don't think is a good strategy in a debate, because you want to keep to the rebuttals and respond to what your opponent has to say, because if you don't respond to major arguments, that's considered a dropped argument, and there's really nothing in response to that, so you concede the argument if you don't respond to it.
Yeah, well, you kept making the point to him that all he's doing is making assertions. He's not actually providing any evidence. He's not actually proving that the Christian God exists. I don't think he even really gave it a good shot. He just keeps making claims on faith without actually ever showing that the claims are valid to begin with.
Yeah, there was one thing he kept saying about how essentially everything that begins to exist has a cause, and his backing for that was essentially, well, we just know that. It's self-evident, and we just know that. And it's a law. He called it the law of cause and effect. I've never heard of this before. But I in the response, I picked up a lot of assumptions that he had in that and attacked that premise, because that's one of the main premises of that argument. And I argued, well, we see things on Earth. We see a ship. We assume that it has a shipbuilder because we have prior experiences with ships and shipbuilders, and we know how those things work. And we have many, many, many experiences of these things. But when we're talking about the universe, we don't have many, many, many experiences with this, and we understand far little about the universe compared to ships and shipbuilders. So we can't really apply this. This knowledge can't be extended from one sphere to another. And in response to that, it was just, well, I can't believe that you're saying that, and we just know that. And it was just, I was hoping for more from Pastor Brewster on that front.
Yeah, essentially he was just engaging in an argument from ignorance, which is pretty much the only thing most theists have to deal with. I just can't imagine that this isn't true, therefore I'm going to insist that it's true.
Yeah, actually, that was, well, I was just going to say that was the part of the debate that I was really interested in. And actually I wanted to say more about it. Because I think trying to think what he might have been thinking, because it sounds like he wants the Bible to be, or his view, he wants to start off with the Creator causes something, then it down the line, like Genesis, how he set the universe into motion, and it sounded like he was trying to, he was dealing linearly.
Linearly.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, there you go.
Right. That word.
Yeah. So that's what he was wanting, and I was hoping that actually that could have been expanded more, because at least my understanding of the Big Bang, we're talking about, from a singularity to universe back to a singularity. It just keeps on going. So there is still kind of a cause and effect, but it just keeps, it's one of those continuously. I was hoping he would, expand more on that. Is that what you were hoping for? Or
yeah. And what was pretty interesting is that he excluded God from this law of cause and effect that he said. He said, well, this doesn't apply to God, because God is just uncaused. Okay, well that's interesting, because if every effect needs a cause and God is an effect, then God would need a cause, but he exempted God from that. And I followed up and say, okay, well, why isn't it the case that the universe could then just be uncaused? Why can't we just put the universe into that? Why need an explanation there if you say God doesn't need an explanation? And I haven't really heard anything in response to that. And that's the usual thing that I happen to say, because people want to put God in this one category as being exempt from all these other things that we're applying to everything else. But in this case, God just kind of gets the exemption. And I don't really think that's fair or that's right to do.
Yeah, going back to what I was saying at the beginning, it's just another characteristic that he's just arbitrarily assigning to God without actually demonstrating that God has this characteristic. Oh, okay, great. God is exempt? Says who? Where did you get this information? You're just basically making it up or taking it out of a book. You have not verified any of the information that you're giving as a fact. None of these things are facts until you can actually back them up rationally.
Yeah, it goes to that too. Even if you say that the Creator is uncaused, well, how do you know that? Where does that information come from? And the attributes you mentioned are interesting too, because a powerful being could have created the universe. Perhaps it was a rather intelligent being who had created the universe, but how do we get this all-powerful, all-intelligent, all-loving being out of that? I mean, with other theists like William Lane Craig, for instance, he'll say as much as, well, I don't think this argument demonstrates that, but this starts the case, and this makes a cumulative case when you consider 2 or 3 other arguments. But with Pastor Brewster, we didn't even get that. I didn't see how he got these attributes through these arguments.
Yeah, it's great that you brought that up, because he was making claims like all causes have to be greater than their effects. Well, that's obviously not true. We can see that around us. Humans build cars, but cars are faster than humans. So we're obviously not greater than the cars that we build. We build airplanes, but airplanes can fly and we can't. So we're obviously not greater than airplanes. So there's all kinds of really obvious examples for where his claim is just completely false.
Yeah, and I'm not even really sure. I guess you can interpret it in that way, but when he's saying that effects are greater or causes are greater than effects, I'm not really sure what that even means, because when we talk about cause and effect, we're talking about causation. There's no, as far as I know, terminology of something being greater. What does it mean greater? Does it mean having more value? Does it mean having more power, more potential? I'm not really sure what he's talking about there, and I didn't get so much of an explanation on that. There's also a difference between something that is the result of something and an effect, as he was using it. There seemed to be equivocations of these words. These words were being used in different contexts with different definitions, and it seemed to be very confusing. See, I'm even getting confused when talking about it, as trying to sort this thing out.
Well, it's because it's not really an argument. It's just an assertion anyway. It's just a way for them to justify their beliefs instead of actually having to demonstrate that their beliefs are true. And that's pretty common.
Yeah, the moral argument has another flaw to go to that too, that even if we do admit that these objective moral values do exist and that there is this lawgiver or designator, it can even be an evil God. Perhaps this all evil God sets into law what is all evil or what is good. And why does it have to be the case that an all good God must demonstrate that which is good? I don't see why that's the case either. So the moral argument doesn't get to that conclusion.
Well, you have to remember that the moral argument that he's using is really just the fallacy from consequences. He doesn't like where a subjective morality leads, therefore he insists that it doesn't exist. Whether he likes it or not really has nothing to do with whether it's real.
Oh, that's interesting, because later in the debate, he came up with this thing where it sort of shifted. It turned out to be, well, society will just devolve in a moral ruin if morality is relative, and if humans set the laws, everything's just not going to work or something. And yeah, it was just really confusing as the argument changed shape there. I'm not sure where that was going or how that came about.
Well, because they want their set of moral rules to be the only set of moral rules out there. But if you look at the real world, the Muslims have their different set of moral rules, the Buddhists have a different set, the Hindus have a different set, the Christians have a different set. There's obviously no single set of objective morality, and I was just waiting for him to pop up and go, well, how do we know that there is one set of morals? Well, because God has written it on our hearts. But obviously the evidence doesn't support that conclusion.
That's more question begging too. When philosophers use the term question begging, they mean that you're asserting what you're trying to demonstrate in the process of trying to demonstrate that thing. So if he's saying, if he's using this argument, say how we know God exists, and then within the process of doing that, he's saying that God wrote the moral laws on our hearts, it's just circular reasoning there. Well, how do we know God exists? Because God wrote morality on our hearts. That doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but it is pretty standard, I guess, for most of these debates, because I see the same things going on over and over and over and over again.
Yeah, there's the other objection, the Euthyphro dilemma, which comes out of a dialogue involving Socrates, written by Plato. And the question, into modern terms, is some act moral because God endorses it, or is an act moral because it is endorsed by God? And if God's designation makes something moral, it seems that morality could be arbitrary, that God could say, well, I think that killing children for the fun of it is moral, so therefore it is. Well, that can't work. So it seems that we have to have the second alternative, that God would endorse that which is moral, so then God seems to be secondary to the whole thing, that he's not the one actually designating. And divine command theory, the idea that we can get our ethics from some religious perspective or from a deity, is one of the most failed moral theories. You have people saying that they're righteous in committing genocide because of the message of God, or God communicated with them, and that's really problematic.
Yeah, all you have to do is read the Old Testament when they did that all the time.
Right.
You know, they're writing down, hey, go kill off that group of people over there. God said so.
Yeah. And after the debate, there was a discussion that occurred on my Facebook page about, I think it was in 1 Kings, where there's a passage with Elijah. There's this bald man who is mocked by some children, and these she-bears come out of the forest after Elijah places a curse on these children, and the she-bears maul the children to death. And Pastor Brewster's response to this was, well, God's ways are just higher than ours, and he would have to have a reason for doing that, and these reasons are just undetectable, and in the end, it might just all work out because we don't really have all that evidence. We're not privileged to this certain knowledge that God might have. So this is what we hear. We just can't understand the mind of God, and for all we know, there could be a reason, but we just can't comprehend it now.
Yeah, 42 kids down.
Yeah, it seems to be the ultimate cop-out, and it really renders belief in God unfalsifiable, because no matter what challenge you can put to it, you can always retreat to, well, for all you know, God has this X reason, and well, why is there suffering? Well, God just has a secret plan and we're just unaware of it. Well, why would the Bible be inaccurate in this one part? Oh, well, for all we know, God just put it that way so that people can question, and, maybe that's why, but we just can't know. We could just go on these all day, and we could do this with other theories, and clearly we wouldn't accept this. If I said, oh, well, there's a unicorn in this room, well, I can't touch it. Oh, well, actually that unicorn is really shy, and, it's really, doesn't want to be detected, and it doesn't work.
Yeah, it would be like you standing up in the middle of his church, pulling out a gun, blowing away 75 of his parishioners, and then saying, well, God made me do it. You can't prove wrong, so.
Or, well, how could you condemn that? Because you don't have all the information that I might have, and, there's a reason I did it, but you just can't understand it. You just can't really understand it. I can't explain it to you, and we have to also apply this to the Holocaust. Well, maybe Hitler had a really good reason, and you just don't know. So we'll just have to wait and see, and it might work out in the end. So it's really problematic to assert that.
Yeah, the whole thing was really kind of a mess. But I was thinking, though, that the debate format that you guys were using, and that's a pretty standard debate format, but it's not really conducive to chasing down a lot of these details, especially when he wasn't giving a whole lot. But, what would you say to him if, say, he contacted you via email and wanted to continue the debate in much more detail over a longer period of time? Yeah. Would you be happy to do something like that with him?
Well, there actually was discussion following the debate from some of his parishioners who said that they were really interested and that they'd like to hear more. And I talked to Pastor Brewster. I said I'd be interested in having some sort of roundtable discussion and throw some other people in there too. And that would be a really good event. It would allow for more explanation of these ideas and going more into detail. And Pastor Brewster said that was a format he was more comfortable with. There's also another local pastor whom I talked to about the debate challenge, and he said that he'd be more comfortable with the discussion and that would be better. He would rather that. So there could be another discussion in the past involving the two of us. That's a public thing. And that'd be really cool. I'd be up for that.
That'd be great. I would love to see something like that because it's not as structured where you can just sit down and just have a discussion about the evidence and not have to go, well, I got 10 minutes to spend. What am I going to say? And then I have to shut up.
Yeah. And it's tough too because you're really under pressure as you're trying to write things your opponent is saying and then craft a response in that time and keep up with everything else that's going on.
Yeah. Unfortunately, while he was speaking, I was just writing furiously going, all right, fallacy, 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 unfounded, no evidence. It's like after a while, you just kind of run out of things to write down. It's like, okay. He doesn't know. He's not doing it very well.
And in that line of more discussion, I posted about 5 blog posts on my website at justinvacula.com talking about the moral argument, the cosmological arguments, and just some other follow-up. So there's opportunity for discussion there. And Pastor Brewster hopped into discussion, at least on the Facebook threads. And there's opportunity for more people to weigh in on those posts too, especially Brewster's parishioners or, of course, Brewster himself.
Right, I did see those, and we're going to go ahead and link to all those on our page. And I've also got a link to the debate itself so that anybody who hasn't seen it can go take a look.
Yeah, it's available on YouTube, and it's on Brave Hero Radio, the show I host, as an audio-only file. Thankfully, the recording came out really well, and someone was gracious enough to bring a video camera and record the event.
Yeah, unfortunately, you had somebody right next to them with a baby.
Yeah, it was a family event. We had people of all ages from right after birth to in the senior years.
Yeah, because I noticed while the recording was going on, there was somebody right next to it who were just talking in these really quiet, hushed tones. You just kept hearing this. It's like, well, at least they're talking about it.
Yeah, they're pretty engaged. So that was
well,
nice.
That's really great to hear. I mean, I've been to some of these debates where the theist will stack the audience, and it will be a very violent audience that don't want to hear anything the atheist has to say. And they'll sit there and they'll boo and they'll hiss and they'll do all this other stuff. And it's really clear that they're not there to hear a debate. They're here to, cheer on their side. Yeah.
Yeah, well, here it was good that there seemed to be a lot of attention and people who were pretty passionate after the fact chatting with me. Many of these people I'd met before at the National Day of Prayer event, which I had protested, and we had very long discussions there. And some of these people I had seen again, and the conversations continued. There wasn't too much time for lengthy discussions, but I chatted with one individual for maybe 15 minutes who was claiming that her recovery from drug addiction is evidence that God exists. And I said, well, I'm happy that you recovered, and that's great, but I kind of think that you're selling yourself short. I think that you've really put in a lot of effort to get to that position in life. And she said, I don't think so at all, because I've tried before, but ever since I called out to God, I was recovered. And,
but there's lots of people out there who recover from drug addiction who have nothing to do with God, who never ask God for help. There's lots of them who do it, who ask Allah for help, or Vishnu, or anything else. Does that prove that those gods are real?
Right. Yeah, and if we're going to use that epistemology as this religious experiences, as Pastor Brewster said, then we would come to contradictory conclusions. Well, Allah exists and so does Vishnu, and that's really problematic.
Yeah, it was funny when they were asking both of you about what brought you to that point. Before Brewster ever opened his mouth, I said, all right, he grew up in the church, he was indoctrinated, and he had some kind of a vague religious experience. And that's exactly what he said, because that's what all of them say. They're all like that.
Yeah, another thing too that was pretty interesting. I'm trying to think here. We had a religious experience talk. The question answer is I was responding to Pastor Brewster's religious experience, and unfortunately it didn't go back. There wasn't a response to that. As we went into the questions and we said, okay, well, would you like to answer these? I was a bit confused and I thought there was going to be back and forth, but it was just an answering of the questions. But it would have been nice to continue the discussion on that matter.
Yeah, I know. I saw that when you started to ask him questions, and no, you can't do that.
Yeah. Oh, I thought that's what we agreed to. Oh, maybe not. Okay, I'm confused. All right.
Yeah. If I had been you up on that stage when he was refusing to answer questions, I would have been going, hey, I'm open for anything. Ask me anything. I'm not afraid to answer any question. But
well, this debate actually came out of a lot of disrespect from theists. When I was involved with church-state activism in 2009, I had objected to a nativity display on a courthouse lawn that was it was a single display, and far off to the side was a menorah behind a tree. That was problematic. And eventually, after I objected, the ACLU got involved with the issue, and the courthouse had removed the nativity display. 3 or 4 days later, the display was put back up with other decorations. So it was an inclusive display, and I was happy with that. And following all of that, and during all of that, there were many religious individuals who were particularly nasty to me online, and there were some local ministers who were claiming that their rights were being taken away and that their beliefs were under attack, and we were trying to take away their beliefs. And there's this perception that we're trying to make religion illegal, And there was a lot of nonsense. And there were some very mild threats. There was one, fellow student of mine, I was in undergrad at the time, and the student was also at the same university, who had said, he dared me to come to his room and he would punch my face in or something like that. And, all this happened, and my response was, okay, let's talk about these issues instead of just being nasty. And I felt the debate challenge was a good way to do that. And it was standing for quite a while, and it's good to see the respectful discussion happen.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've talked about this on the show a lot before, but it's always funny that when Christians, and it's not just Christians, it just depends on where you are, but when Christians say, you're trying to take away our beliefs, you're trying to discriminate against us, what they're really saying is, you're trying to stop us from discriminating against everybody else.
Yeah, and that's usually the case. I mean, even objecting here to the Christian prayers, the Judeo-Christian prayers at my local council meetings, I asked the question, well, why not prayers to Allah? Why not prayers to Zeus? And after talking about this after the fact, if it were a majority Muslim population in the area, or even on council, or both, they would probably be Muslim prayers, and the Christians would object to that. So it's okay if they do it, but if someone else does it, then we just can't have that.
Yeah, I understand that.
It's a very unfair balance, and after getting in discussion with some individuals, they'll understand and say, I see where you're getting with that, so maybe we should just have something like a moment of silence, or just remove it altogether, or pray before the meetings. There are so many ways around it, but this council is very undaunted, right? They don't want to even budge with their prayer during the meeting.
Yeah. Well, we see that across the country. Mike, did you have anything to add?
Not really. Yeah, I can't think of anything. I mean, I love the debate. It was great. I mean, I thought it was great. It was a great learning experience for me. Like I said, I'm kind of getting my feet wet being in the activist side of atheism. So, it was kind of a nice, I'd say this even make a nice, introduction, take your part out, take your part and make like an introduction to atheism type of video. That would, cause I got a lot out of it, listening, and cause I think that's what it comes down to. The main argument is, does God exist? And, I thought you did a really nice job with it.
Well, thanks. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And yeah, I guess, as a launch pad, that can be a really good thing, evaluating the reasons for belief or non-belief. There sometimes in some atheist circles, I hear this idea that, well, atheism leads to these certain values, and atheism is the process of an intellectual journey. And I don't really see this being the case, because there are many atheists out there, I'm sure, who have just lived life as if God just didn't exist. Perhaps they weren't really introduced to a religious household. Perhaps they just find religion to be a bad idea and they don't believe. But that's not really a good reason, because, of course, the religions as they manifest themselves here on earth could look really bad, but God could just still exist, and people could be disobedient or behaving in poor ways. I've met many atheists who really haven't thought so much about the issues, or were able to respond to the arguments, and sometimes they get hung out to dry in a debate, and that's really disappointing, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah,
so yeah,
that kind of thing
it's
happens.
really good examining the arguments and really considering what's being said and what the issues are at hand.
All right. Well, I think we can go ahead and wrap it up. Did you have anything that you wanted to let our listeners know about?
Well, if you want to listen to my radio show, you can go to blogtalkradio.com/bravehero. We have many interviews with people in the secular circles. I'm going to be attending the Freedom From Religion Foundation in Madison, Wisconsin at the end of the month. So if any listeners are going to be there, I'll be happy to meet with you. I'll also be reporting on the convention on the radio show and live tweeting the event, so it'll be fun for all. Thanks again to various donors who contributed to make this trip possible. And it's nice. The community is a pretty good place, despite all of the nastiness that might happen every so often. I encourage people to find their local meetup group or a local group and try to get involved. Put your feet in the water and have some fun. Meet some people.
Sounds great. We have links to your debate. We're going to have links to all of your after-debate thoughts. And if you do have anything further with either Pastor Brewster or with the other gentleman that you said you were going to talk about, yep. I'd love to find out more about that, because I think you did a really fantastic job in this debate.
Yeah, thanks. I think it could be a pretty good community event and something for people to reflect on.
All right. Sounds good. We're going to let you go, and you have a fantastic day.
All right. Thanks a lot.
What? That's all there is? Well, I guess all good things must come to an end, and so, shut down the lights, hang up the mics. We'll be back in another week with more conservative atheist goodness. As always, remember we can be reached on Facebook, Google+, and Twitter. You can email us, listen to us on iTunes and Stitcher Radio, and we're building up quite a backlog of material. According to my records, we have nearly 40 hours of content currently available, and we're not stopping anytime soon. So until we meet again, we bid a fond farewell, stay safe, and see you next week. You've been listening to the Bitchspot Report Podcast with your hosts, Cephas and Mike. You can follow us on Twitter respectively at Bitchspot1 or at JDRipper1962. Please visit our website at report.jdragononline.com. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/The Bitchspot Report. We're also on Google+, iTunes, and YouTube. Those links are on our website. We'd love to hear from you. You can reach us via email at report@jdragononline.com. Comments, ideas, and suggestions are always welcome. We'll be back next week with another fun and fact-filled episode. Please tune in again.